It's wonderful to be back with you here in Laguna Beach and to have a book published. And it's doing really well for a self-published book. And what that means is that some people other than my friends have bought it. And what that means is that my friends liked it well enough to convince their friends to buy it. And I am very happy about that. The book comes out of my experiences with a group called the Deep Adaptation Forum. It's an online global group holding groups to support people who are seeing their world fall apart around them. A few disaster survivors, a lot of nature lovers, some sustainability professionals, some human rights activists, and a lot of climate activists. When people are anxious and heartbroken about things falling apart, I am the eye of the storm for them. I make a calm center where they can catch their breath, try to get reoriented and figure out what the heck is going on and what to do about it. I don't try to fix them or tell them it's not that bad. I listen to their pain, their struggle, their grief. I reflect back some peace and understanding. Sometimes I have a word of wisdom for them. Sometimes just a presence. This is not the kind of job most people sign up for. I mean, it sounds a little intense, it sounds hard, but I know from my work in hospice that just bearing witness to someone's struggle and saying, I am not afraid to stand with you when things can't be fixed can often do a great deal to relieve people's suffering. Because a lot of the suffering that we feel when things are falling apart in our lives comes from not being able to talk about it in public, feeling that we're just going to drop a burden on somebody else and they're going to resent us for it, or that it's not fair to them or something. Because in our culture, we're not allowed to fall apart, and things are not allowed to fall apart. We're supposed to bootstrap our success and happiness, or else we're failures. You know, if something bad does happen, we need to get over it as fast as possible and stop being so negative. Aren't you over it yet? I can't tell you the number of people who come to a gathering in my organization and apologize for being so negative. In other words, for talking about their grief at grief circles, for goodness sake. They apologize for crying when I'm the facilitator and I model crying early on in the grief circle. In our culture, it's not okay to talk about loss, except, you know, for a little while right after someone dies. Our culture is about infinite growth and progress and self-improvement. So it's not okay to talk about what's real and what's in our hearts when we're facing hard times. But I think it's a privilege to bear witness to people who are facing hard times. I think it's holy work. It's compassion in action, and it can be transformative for them and for me. My book is a bit odd. It doesn't know what category to be in. Let's see. Library of Congress categories: global warming and climate change, stress management, activism, and social justice. Try to shelve that in the bookstore. And so because of this cultural phobia and because of my book's strangeness, it has a strange introduction. It's not titled Introduction. It's titled, Read This First. Is this book for you? The book is not for people who must have happy endings, who must put a bow on it. It's for people who are realizing, things I thought I could take for granted, things I relied on, are being lost. It's for people who are asking, how do I hold it together physically, mentally, spiritually, when things around me are falling apart? And what makes sense to do when I can't fix it? One point of the book is to acknowledge this kind of loss and disorientation so that people who have it don't feel so alone. And it was really written with those people in mind. But then I figured, why not tell the rest of you about it? So the point of the book is also to give all of us tools and resources to stay calm and centered despite loss and disruption. It could be someone else's loss, or it might be your loss someday too. You too can be the eye in the storm. So the book has many tools and stories and resources for being the eye in the eye of the storm. And I just want to lift up 3 of those today. The first tool I've already told you a bit about. It's befriending your grief. Don't be scared of it. Don't be ashamed of it. Your grief is your love for the thing that is lost. Honor your grief, and you honor that thing that you love. Get real. Join a grief circle. They're wonderful. Enough about grief, though. The second tool is finding stories that work. By stories, I mean the cultural and personal lenses that define our reality. These stories tell us how the world works, how we should live, what we should value. And when we find ourselves in despair or hopelessness, that means our stories are failing us. So it's time to let go of those failed stories and find some different stories to live into. And this is harder than it sounds, because it's easier to deny the evidence in front of your eyes than to deny a story that has defined your identity. And that, my friends, explains a lot of crackpot politics. Reality doesn't have to fit our stories, as the media clearly shows is true for many people. But if we want to actually face the storm without getting swept away, we have to change our stories to fit a changing reality. As the poem said, we have to learn to breathe underwater. When I was writing the book, I started questioning a lot of my old stories and trying out new ones. And one new story that's working pretty well for me is really simple. It goes like this: things fall apart. That's the way the world works sometimes. Most things grow and then they get old and they kind of plateau and then they fade away or drop off a cliff. They die. This is normal. Infinite growth is not normal. It's a capitalist delusion. So I don't have to panic or frantically try to fix things that are falling apart. Maybe it's just their time. I probably can find ways to be useful when things are falling apart, but fixing is not one of them. My frantic attempts at fixing often make things worse. Letting go of a story of success or progress can feel like failure, but it's not. It's accepting reality. And you get to decide where the line is. I'm not telling you what you need to accept, but just have the invitation that it doesn't always have to be success, and it doesn't last, nothing lasts forever. So for instance, I've been watching a nationwide nonprofit that I love slowly crumble. You know, the regions keep joining together and the committees keep covering a wider and wider area. And it's sad. I love that group. But I don't have to figure out whose fault it is or try to hold everything together in my region that is beyond my ability to do. Things fall apart and this organization is dwindling. It's in the order of things, and I can let it go even as I mourn its loss. Elder relatives have health crises. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, people fall apart too. I can grieve my elder relatives' loss of independence, their uncertain future. Can that person recover? That's not mine to fix or control. What a relief, not thinking I have to fix the unfixable. I used to have some pretty grandiose stories about activism. I heard it. You can save the world. And I took that to heart. Well, you can save the world is a failed story in my book. It makes activists either deny reality or feel like failures. I'm more humble now. I can't save the world, and I'm not going to pretend that I can. I refuse to feel guilty that I can't do the impossible. I can make a difference, and I will. And one thing I can do is tell life-giving stories. Maybe those stories will give some affirmation and hope to someone who's been watching things fall apart in their life and failing in their attempts to do the impossible. The story I most love to tell, though, is how we are all interconnected. Industrial consumer society has hidden that beautiful truth from us at great cost in order to sell us cheap stuff from exploited workers all around our exploited earth home. It's time to name and claim our interconnection, which binds us, which limits us, and live as if we are really interdependent, because we are. When I attempt to honor every person and every part of our earth home, I do not want to run to the store and buy more. I'm too busy. I feel overwhelmed with the richness and blessing in my life. And what a powerful antidote that is to fear and loss and late-stage capitalism. What a life-giving story. We are all deeply, inextricably connected. So the third and last thing we can do to not fall apart, in addition to grieving well and telling new stories, is to practice that interdependence by cultivating relationships. We can cultivate relationships with neighbors, whatever their politics, whatever their wacky stories. These are the most convenient people to turn to in case of emergency. Don't get stuck in the stories. Bring food instead. I like to bring baked goods, flowers from my garden, invite people over for beer. Those are some of my strategies for cultivating relationships with neighbors. We can cultivate relationships with kindred spirits, people who understand us and share our passions. And here you are. These people feed our souls. Make time for them. Schedule time with them. And here we are. Thank you. Who's in a volunteer group or committee? Raise your hand. I don't have enough hands to raise for the number of groups I'm in. Who's in a group that when they meet takes time to check in and allow people to get to know each other? What's going on really? Yeah, that is worth doing. It is not efficient. And you know what? Relationships are not efficient. Knowing and being known is not efficient, and that's why capitalism will never pay you for it. We can cultivate relationships also with the sacred, and here we are. Now, I'm Christian, so I kind of think of Jesus first, not only, but you get to pick anything you want when I say the word sacred. Just whatever you pick, it's going to connect you beyond your narrow personal identity and root you in something more, something bigger or wiser or older than us human beings. So hang on to what you name as sacred. Spend time with it. Root yourself in it. Those roots can sustain you in stormy times much better than trying to bootstrap yourself out of your situation. And finally, we can cultivate relationships beyond the human, relationships with the non-human world. Now, as a scientist, I didn't know I was allowed to do that, but I'm over it now. So many of the people I've been meeting in these groups have close and personal relationships with their garden, with the birds at their feeder, with some wild place that they love dearly. One person I know specializes in relationships with rocks. Anything, it can be anything non-human. Cultivating reciprocal relationships with non-humans can require a little imagination, but it's not hard. It helps to have conversations with them as if they're persons and to listen and see what they have to say. Does that sound a little wacky, talking to my garden as if it was a person? Most traditional cultures, though, do that because that's how people know how to be in relationship to other persons. Persons don't need to be human. Most traditional cultures live or lived when they were able in balance with the non-human world. If we valued and respected it like they do, we would not be in the mess we're in. Well, learning to do that is not going to magically fix our predicament. It's just the right thing to do. And it's so rewarding. The non-human world is so generous in the gifts it gives when we seek to be in relationship with it. So I have to tell you a little story about that. My friend Emma Mary Gathergood, that is her real name, lives in the middle of England, and she leads a weekly meditation on Zoom that she calls Earth Listening. I call it my second church. Earth Listening is one of those places I've learned about being in relationship with the non-human world. That's where I met my friend, the Rock Whisperer. Each week, Emma Mary chooses a different theme. She's a retired therapist, by the way. There's definitely a little therapeutic stuff in there. First, we check in with each other because relationship matters. Efficiency is not the goal. Then Emma Mary guides us to explore a topic. It could be the fall equinox. The last one I went to was on that. Or it could be anything. And she invites us to go in our mind's eye or physically, because it's just in my backyard, to a place in nature and ask that place about that topic and listen for what that place has to say to us. So then we just be in that place in nature for about 5 minutes and see what happens. We come back to the Zoom group and report on what we heard. And reliably, almost every person gets a word of wisdom that's right for them. And the rest of us benefit too by hearing it. And love. We feel the love that we have for that place in nature, but we also feel loved ourselves. Emma Mary likes to say, we know we love the earth, but remember, the earth loves you too and wants to show it. That feeds my soul. Earth listening helps me to be the eye of the storm. It helps me to find that calm center from which I can face bad news and I can support others who are in the storm. So I'll keep befriending my grief. I'll keep telling stories that work for me and ask you about what stories work for you. And I'll keep cultivating all kinds of relationships, including talking to the plants in my garden and listening to them in return. Because that feels to me like belonging to something much bigger than me. It feels like coming home. Even if home is sometimes in rough shape, it's a beautiful, miraculous, amazing home. And we are an integral part of it. Let's love and honor it and each other. Amen.